I am content because before me looms the hope of love. I do not have it, I do not yet have it. It is a bird strong enough to lead me by the rope it bites. Unless I pull, it is strong enough for me. I do worry the end of my days might come and I will not yet have it. But even then, I will be brave upon my deathbed. And why shouldn't I be? I held things here, and I felt them. And to all I felt, I will whisper, Hosanna for goodbye. It is sweet to think of myself alone at that very moment, able to say such a thing to all that was my life, to all that was not. Psalm 40, a poem in the collection of Katie Ford's If You Have to Go. Good evening. My name is Charles Carr, and I'm the host of Philly Loves Poetry here, which is a collaboration between the Moonstone Arts Center of Philadelphia and PhillyChem. The focus of our program is to give our audience the experience of the rich culture of poetry in the city of Philadelphia. So tonight we have a very special guest, someone who lived in Philadelphia. And when I extended the invitation to Katie Ford, I said that while she has left Philadelphia, Philadelphia has not forgotten her. And when I announced put this announcement out, there was a lot of very positive response to it. So Katie is the author of 4 books of poems: Deposition, Colosseum, Blood Lyrics, and If You Have to Go. Blood Lyrics was a finalist for the LA Times Book Prize and Rilke Prize. Colosseum was named among the best books of 2008 by Publishers Weekly and the Virginia Quarterly Review, and led to a Lannan Literary Fellowship and the Larry Levis Prize. International invitations to read and lecture include festivals in Tunis, Morocco, Oslo, and Stockholm. Katie has taught poetry and creative writing for 19 years around the country at Loyola University in New Orleans, Reed College, Franklin and Marshall College, the Iowa Summer Writing Festival, the Community of Writers, and at numerous festivals and residency. Katie now teaches at the University of California, Riverside. Her new work, Estrangement, will be featured in the May-June issue of Philadelphia's American Poetry Review. As I said, Katie lived in Philadelphia from 27 to 2014 and holds it dear as it is the city in which her daughter was born. So welcome, Katie.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much, Charles.
So coming from Psalm 40, which is very well known among the Psalms as a psalm of praise and a psalm of also asking for help. I really found it really curious after, those 39 sonnets, to have this appear. And what I see is so much spirituality in your poems. After I read the book initially, and of course I look up reviews, and of course there was this persistent theme as this is a book of poetry that is in the aftermath from a breakup of a marriage. But I didn't, I see that, but I didn't quite, read it like that. I didn't receive it like that. You have an interesting saying is that a poem isn't a poem until the reader reads it, and then it's a poem, because everybody comes to poetry differently. So I'm curious of why you chose Psalm 40, and also, that powerful spiritual force, that one finds in not only in this collection, but in all the books that I've read of yours.
So the part of Psalm 40 from the Hebrew Bible that I was thinking of was the initial opening phrase of "I waited patiently," and then also a kind of refrain throughout of "How long to sing our song," and that those two, this idea of waiting. Um, uh, and then the singing about the waiting, actually, the questioning, but then also the kind of lyrical action um, that takes place during the waiting. Uh, that's what drew me to recall that psalm, and then also to use it as a kind of I don't know, a bit of a shadow or ghost behind the poem itself, um, which is not to say that it's a dead force in it, but um, that it was in my mind and not in a kind of literal one-to-one relationship between Psalm 40 and then my poem, also called Psalm 40. But I'm drawn to mystics and writers who talk about waiting and of all very different religious temperaments and traditions. And it seems to be something that mystics recognize as essential to recognize as a kind of attribute of the exile or the distance or even, a word I'm thinking a lot about right now is estrangement with not just a new poem I'm writing, but this idea spiritually of estrangement, the kind of falling off from wherever it is we come from. um, and Rumi, I just learned a passage of Rumi that where Rumi talks about all of us having this remnant portion of ocean in us all, and that might perhaps take us back there. Rumi doesn't actually say that part, just that there's ocean in all of us. And for a 13th century poet to kind of have this idea that not that we crawled out of the ocean, I don't think Rumi's thinking about that, but that there's something oceanic inside of us. But it's also interesting in terms of being prescient toward Darwin's ideas. But this kind of animal instinct that um, we come from somewhere else. Did we, are we from the ocean? I don't know. I've been thinking lately, do the ocean creatures wonder, were they from the land? Is that just the instinct of this sense of being exiled from whence we came? So a sense of waiting inside of that drew me back to that psalm. And then, um, the sonnets do have 39. I didn't know how many sonnets there would be when I was writing that sequence. It then happened that I turned 40 during the writing of this book. And so the little bit of secret between myself and now myself in Philadelphia is that when I wrote Psalm 40, it was actually also a kind of age marker or signature. Um, I don't know, poet, we have to have pleasure somewhere in the writing of these serious uh, uh, pieces. And for me, I thought, it also feels fitting in that way. Yeah.
I said to you, in the opening statement, how I kind of veered off from seeing the book in a certain way. Maybe other people saw it, and it was really at Sonnet 7 of yours, and I'll just quote some of it that really caught my attention. and this is only partial. I didn't think the kingdom was supposed to be like that. Theologies lay and stretch me on the rack. I didn't think love should feel like that. I can only live through a glass darkly. Ask, it shall be given. I can't even try. So that reference to, St. Paul's, famous poetic statement really kind of set the whole book in a different context, to me, is that, and once again, brought me back to what I see as a great part of your work is this longing and this searching and this questioning. So much of the spiritual and our relationship, to the spiritual, and how we can kind of customize how we want to have that relationship. And so I think that's very powerful, and how you feed that into um, how you feed this into the whole book. I don't know if I'm overstating it or maybe overreaching with that perspective.
No, I mean, I could see the book seeming like a kind of dark glass in a way where not everything is utterly clear. The sonnets are a kind of dreamscape in a way, and you know, things take place there that are not literal at all. Um, and I feel that that's a very honest spiritual position to admit that we see things very much in part, and or if at all, and I mean the ineffable. I'm not meaning that we can't say certain things have happened on this earth. It's not a perspective toward the historical, it's a perspective toward the invisible, actually. And so I would feel actually a really large trespass to speak with certainty toward the ineffable. Even language about the ineffable really is protective against such kind of declarative claims about it. And I like something Virginia Woolf talks about in her diaries, a writer's diary, and I'm paraphrasing, but she says something like, if we begin to talk about the soul, it slips away. But then one day you'll be looking at a dirty spot on your ceiling, and all of a sudden the soul comes forward. And so I like that idea and that sense of, if we are, if we have a target of saying what is true about the unsayable, I like that image of it really slipping out of our grasp.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You have, of course, something that I did mention in your background. Of course, you've studied theology at Harvard and comparative religions. So, I mean, you've had considerable life to, to weigh, all this, both as a scholar, as a poet. And that's very evident. It's interesting that you bring that up about her seeing, you have one poem, and it's not in this book, but it's in Blood Lyrics, about the soul and the smoke above the chimney. I think it was the reference, and using that as a, that kind of, in that poem really struck me that you used that image, because it is so ephemeral, but you built so much around in that poem.
Yeah, that I don't have it in front of me, but that poem is called "The Soul," and it starts. It disappears. It reappears as chimney smoke. and that's here ended the memorized portion. But yeah, I this sense of the soul coming forward when it will, and and then that poem ends with Leah, is why I leant upon it like a tired worker upon a gate. And yeah, whatever the soul is, I mean, some people don't like to use that word. I'm still okay using that word. I feel like it holds a lot of value still for me, even though I thankfully couldn't define it. But you really could put any word there where you're just talking about the depth of human, the human creature, really.
Mm-hmm. So, getting to the book, there are the 39 sonnets, and you very interestingly used a special form of the sonnet called the Crown Sonnet. And number one, the choice of that I thought was a very good one because it creates a momentum in this book in linking so much together. So, could you explain to our audience that style or that form and why you selected that for this particular book?
Yeah, the crown or the garland of sonnets, it's a very kind of archaic form where the last line of the first sonnet becomes the first line of the next. So they continue that way and they keep on linking into what can be imagined as a laurel crown or a kind of garland of leaves or flowers. And I began the first sonnet and simply thought maybe I could write a sonnet. And one of the original lines, although it doesn't now start sonnet one, is a line that's in it that says, "All I wanted was possible." And that first started sonnet one. And then I just kind of unfolded that a bit, and it was very messy. Um, and then I thought the next day, well, what if I tried a crown where I just took that last line and made it the first line? And actually, it seemed kind of a comic option to me because of how old-fashioned it is, and also just unlikely and strange. And I don't know, I was kind of willing for that bit of momentum, even if it seemed a little ridiculous also. And, my marriage was ending at the time. So for this form to come forward with a little bit of a levity, I mean, I know the forum, once I'm engaging, it doesn't have much levity, but conceptually, there was a levity to the idea of engaging this very old form.
Mm-hmm.
It felt pleasing to me. And I, what it offered me daily was a starting point for the next sonnet. So I wasn't always having to come at the page with total blankness. I would have something small, to lead me in to the next movement. And it became a real gift that I started to rely upon and was grateful for, formally or in terms of the shape of poems. With these sonnets, it mimicked really another type of momentum I had formally only in my first book, Deposition, where I wrote about 25 poems titled Last Breath, but then they have different endings or beginnings on them. But there I found a form, I created a form for myself, and I just kept using it, and it had something inside of it that was yielding and accessing not just what I wanted to say, because I didn't know what I wanted to say, but uh, somehow harnessed creative, something creative. And the sonnets did that too. So I knew I was in the middle of something that was unusual for me as a poet. I was highly aware that it wouldn't last forever.
Mhm.
And it was a very ecstatic feeling as a writer to have that. And so it was a very strange time to have this deep sadness of the loss of a long partnership alongside the kind of artistic, ecstatic experience of articulation. Um, and, form for me, when it arrives in that manner, like I said, it's rare. Um, it feels like perhaps why, or the source of why we have the story of the muse. I kind of think of the muse as an image, or a legend perhaps, that is actually enacting the sensation for a poet of the shapeliness and the subject matter being in this kind of simpatico generative relationship. And I didn't go towards free verse. I think I knew deep down, or I wasn't articulating this to myself at the time, but the chaos of free verse cannot, for me at least, come at a chaotic emotional time. I can't pour emotional chaos toward free verse that has its own chaos inside of it. I did too much. So the kind of the vessel that was steadier was much kinder to me.
Mhm. I'm always interested in how poets come to poems, and it's been a more recent inquiry, and it really followed an interview or a background for an interview that I had with Paul Muldoon last month, and um, I was surprised, when I read this interview that he gave a couple of years ago, and he said, "Great poems come from this area, ignorance." When I teach at Princeton, for example, I tell my students, what we want to really work on now is what you don't know, the condition of not knowing. There are many people who write poems who've not got their heads around this idea, who actually think that they know what they're doing. I really believe that the minute one thinks one knows what one is doing, actually, in any department of life, one's probably making a terrible mistake. And then I've been reading an Estonian poet by the name of Jan Kaplansky, um, and he has a poem. It's not titled. It's part of his collection, and he says, "Perhaps all poetry comes entirely from ignorance, is a particular sort of ignorance, and that is much harder to learn than knowledge." And I also, pinpointed something that you said in an interview a few years ago. You said, "The only requirement for me is when I begin a poem is that I feel something deeply, but I don't know what that something is. I'm inside the poem to find out what it is," which is almost in a way say there's this doubt or this ignorance. Can you
Mhm.
talk about that?
Yeah, I think many poets, I mean, I want to say most, I want to say all in a way, but I shouldn't say all. But I think most poets would agree that if you know where you're going, what's the point? Like, why would you be writing a poem? And that the place of the poem is uh, not just a place of creation in a positive sense, but a place of destruction. In other words,
Mm,
um, it really, the poem will really rake you over the coals and really undo you, and um, you really should tread carefully if you are going to allow a poem to lead the way line by line, because your first thought could really be made into a wreckage by the end. And that kind of transformation that occurs in the poem, I wouldn't have any energy to come back to writing a new poem if I didn't trust that some kind of transformation was going to happen via this art. And that very often does feel destructive. But creativity in, really in ancient and and even modern definitions includes that sense, not just of the building up, but the breaking down. And um, that's, what I come to in these sonnets too, is that it will break you apart. Um, but ultimately, I think that that is for the good. But now, what did you ask me? You asked me about not knowing and doubt. Yes,
Yeah.
I was taught that way from my earliest teachers. Tess Gallagher was the first poet I studied with. She she had a class that she titled "Not Knowing" and becoming comfortable in not knowing. And um, she taught us an essay by Linda Gray, the great, beautiful lyric poet, titled "Not Knowing."
Mm.
And then we read books that were very confounding and uh, could not be summarized, and each poem could not really be held in place by one or even two or five or 10 different uh, interpretations. They defied kind of interpretation. And, you know, I then was taught the same principle by Jory Graham. I remember Jory Graham telling us that Donald Justice had taught her that, saying to her, you have to give in to the um, destructiveness of the poem. And um, I teach my students that same happy lesson.
Mhm.
um, but yeah, uh, those are some thoughts. It's an
Yeah.
endless topic, of course, but
Mhm. What beyond poetry? What do you read? I mean, what really captures you? That doesn't even mean that's about to be books, but
uh,
what kind of feeds you beyond just your poetry, other people's poetry?
yeah, I do really love reading religious thinkers. I like um, reading nonfiction that might analyze different traditions, but also religious language or mystical language. Um, so anything that really touches the hem of what humans have believed, religiously or spiritually, across the ages, anywhere, uh, is captivating to me. Um, let's see. I usually read prose that fiction or novels. I don't always have a novel going, but I I would tend to read novels or short stories at night. Um, I don't even try to write short stories. I don't try at all at fiction, and I have a lot of reasons for that. But just one, I don't think I have a gift for it, but also, I really want to enjoy a genre um, via not at all practicing it. So reserving some kinds of, other kinds of
Mhm.
literature as things there are so many other beautiful writers trying at it, and I just want to sit back and not analyze craft or have my mind do that. So, uh, Yeah, those are things. I'm teaching a class right now called Poets and Their Gods, and it's about poets who have been practitioners of various um, religious traditions or non-traditions around the world. And reading for that class has um, everything I'm reading in there. I find fascinating. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Uh,
Mhm.
well, there's so much to cover, in talking about your poetry, and this conversation could last a long time. But the what we really want to hear is you read your poems. So I'm going to turn it
Okay.
over to you to read your poems, and I really appreciate you accepting our invitation, and it's really wonderful once again to meet you. Uh,
Yes. No, thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here and um, to feel like I'm in Philadelphia a little bit. Um, Actually, my daughter her dad is bringing her to Philly for the first time. So, and well, since she was a baby. So she is excited to come visit Pennsylvania Hospital where she was born.
mm,
Um, yeah. So I'm going to read from the sonnets. I'll begin with the sonnets, and I'll start where they begin, but then I'll leap around a tiny bit. Um, and just, I promise I'm not reading 39 sonnets. Uh, but because it is just this fluid sequence where the poems are linked to each other, I'll just read for a bit without stopping to say anything about the poems themselves. And so uh, I hear that this is being recorded and will show again. So if you get fatigued and can only hang in there for 10 sonnets, you could come back next week. I think it's going to be airing again. Uh, so anyway, I'll do it that way. Um, okay, and I'm not going to say the number of the sonnet either. I'll just read the language. Empty with me, so here I am. I saw some soul set my meal with dream, then leave a gift for me, a 10-tooth comb to rake what's dead from me until the comb's carved medieval scene, where bend two horses, water consoled, adds to me the hope of that number. My own comb's a lime-shined prairie with the grass of plastic acres. My carver never was or must have roamed. All I ever wanted was the communal table. So I do love the steady hand that carved this other comb, the fence of the kingdom, if turned tooth side down. The kingdom does come. For me, this is how. So tiny is the kingdom come, I must weigh and work the taxed fractions of how my soul's paltry income might be counted in. Love isn't mathematics? Oh, yes, it is. Do you think it's a cold thing to say? And what do I know of math? I know more than I've said. I know nearly everything there is. I can add and divide and feel the abstraction subtracted. That's as critically far as any math goes. My one hand tracing two horses is a relief geometry I can feel. Look at them. No auction block and not alone. Not bit yanked to the barrel where drums the beast's scared heart. I bid all on my comb horses, of which I'm not a part. I bid on two, not up for tender, at the kingdom's comb fence. Your Andalusians, I think. It hurt too much to give you names. Your eyes are soft to me of no choices. even as you bend to feed. So many foods to eat, and one is of affliction. I'll know more by its end or grow so scarce of myself, it won't matter what bread did or couldn't descend. I'd rather starve than eat alone the bread of heaven. So it's true, the kingdom knows me. It let me see these horses. There's no proof, just so much given. Animals that thirst, a river near horses. One looks up, the other drinks down. Beneath the red line goes the day, sundown. I'm red with the hurt of sundown. It makes me want to pull the comb through my hair. I hear the horses quiet at the river handle. They've grown uneasy, shy, they're scared. What creature could know what to say when asked, "Can I drag you through me, just to feel?" The poor horses can't recoil, whinny, or move task to task. The question terrifies. I suppose it's real. Still, may I drag you through me, little comb? Boxwood, fine grain, ancient tool. Can't I be allowed to need you too? Your history prescribes you a lasting need. My history is all alone, and alone I know is all. I pick up the comb. I pick up the comb but don't know where to start. A lonely life goes lonely everywhere, even where I plait my part. I suppose there's no reason not to start at the scars, surgical, homemade, all of it goes under the rake. My skin's no stony table. The kingdom's not come here before. My hand grips a mane, I think, a flank's accustomed cold. Is this a shank, a mouth, some teeth gone rank? I thought I'd feel something beside me to comb out the fright. I suppose I was right. Fright came true and turns on a crank. I took the crank because fright your mind so dig from crown to belly. But a tooth caught a link of necklace, a locket, of course. This is true use, to keep one sweet thing around the neck, pre-forged and metal strong. The comb drags my Eden sore mind until even the god of it goes. Why is it the kingdom yesterday sat near and now asks excuse from my table? I know my brand of human. The kingdom only seems, and even that is rare. I define rare like this. It comes, then it goes, then it never was. It comes, then it goes, then it never was. I didn't think the kingdom was supposed to be like that. Theologies lay and stretch me on the rack. I didn't think love should feel like that. I can only live through a glass darkly. Ask, it shall be given, I can't even try. Half ago my life I lifted up to the mountains. On a swim dock I sat dry as dry, while in the water rose a ragged catfish, its mouth an open glass. Glassy water into glass-made mouth. None of my shape opens to none that would pass as ghost of a right hungry mouth. Love lays me on the rack, my desires all gone wrong. It's starved and strong. I think the tradition so stupid and wrong of mourners for hire, keeners who slap tambourines just to stuff a sad scene. The more crammed the number, the more I see that single girl right over there Look over the grave of her own what never will be. She's not even come close. It's all a big fat miss. She sits vigil there. I guess that's what I'd call this. Why ever purchase more of herself, self after self to rip out her hair? A crowd thrashing its ribs over a grave's dank must. I think grief's worst struck against a single chest. I'll retch now over my ground. Luckily, nobody, not anybody's around. Luckily, nobody's around to hear me send my sick into the ground. This is how I pray to the saint of impossible cause. I don't call her name, my body does it all. Not a thing do I make up. There wasn't any honey water, there wasn't any priest. Believe in this, a shaking body, an indiscernible breeze. All day, day says the kingdom doesn't care. It's just not there or leaves us so long I'll have to forget the horses of the comb, forget they ever ran through my hair. Look at me, looking at me, look at carved things. I wish I could be. I wish I could leave me. I can't even know if the horses are for me or against me, of me or in me, beside or despite me. Are they gods or mangy beasts? Were they bought by some empty patron buying life straight into me? I once said they were looking at me, but that may have been the sorry glance of a shun. We love to read into animals, but they might not want anyone. They might not want anyone. Then where's gone my kingdom? All goes to gone. God of my childhood, with your attendant monstrosities, have a little warmth on me, bent and frozen. Hastily now and again it seems you can hear even the farmyard rats gnaw at cobs and whatever fresh dead's around. Though it's confusing to see the golden seaport alongside all that. Well, such is the human eye that doesn't get to choose unless it trains, and I wasn't given the gift of exercise. I will not say you've given me a terrified silence, nor absence, nor presence, nor the sun red and down, whose going you can't protect. Let me, dusky godsend, never believe you protect. I believe that you destroy. I can't that you protect. What I mean is this. Each day I receive, and by moon, night shines to erase. It gets dark in this world. How can I save what's erased by day? Body, the good, is porous. All comes along. I'd like even to say the body is for us. I downed once the sight of a man who swam out and in at the beach, then read between swims on the sand, clearly in repair from what was required of him. Fine night, erase, but I'm still made by the sight of those swims. By the sight of those swims, I'll be bound by this contract, even if it's my soul eyes that sign. I've done worse, and it's true, all on earth does fall through all. It's the through that's prolonged. It's the through that spills. Oh, snow, past my window now. Show me, dear snow, how to make such symmetry, how to lock to lock, so I feel the inside steady enough to believe love might stay right here. Right here. Don't go. just as I've read it could be. Dead voices come from my bedside table now. You're the particulate matter of me. I'm warm. Can't I grasp? It would be life. Oh, I see. It's your turn to sleep your words in me, and life has bodies here. One's right over there. I saw two, the swimmer said to me. A mama whale offshore, her calf in need against her. It gave me perspective. But it didn't. No, it didn't, I said. The beautiful alive doesn't grant perspective. It grants desire. I'm going to skip ahead for a moment. Language about the kingdom is what I inherited in my own Lutheranism that I was raised in. And I find it very problematic for the obvious reasons of patriarchy and hierarchy and all that. But in the sonnets, I do get to a place where I start to talk about the problem of the language of that word itself, but also its origin really with being the language of the spiritual as not being governable by the government. So in our time, it might be to say, the government is inside you, like what governs you is there. So anyway, so I think that's a kind of apology for using language about the kingdom, but I want to get to the sonnet where I kind of deal with that a bit, because kingdom language, I'm very aware of, has been very painful to many people for good reason. So let me get there 1 second. Kingdom, come here to my room. I too am grown paltry with surfaces and have been left unsoothed and do not wish to be understood and am continually thinning. The kingdom's tired. It wanted to be impossible to the brief world, dying for just one corner of the table and too far for the human guest to touch. It remains an agony away and is in agony that we have lost the far use of agony. It's been made ridiculous. It feels pushed together into a thing that can be argued. We can play that game together, or we don't have to. We simply don't have to. I don't want to. You don't want to. I'm so tired of made-up affliction. It makes me want to shred the faces in front of the face. I can hear you outside the room I made, breathing sharply with a hook or fork in your mouth. You've tried hard to find this room, little kingdom. It's easy to see you've had a hard time of it, too. You sound like someone trying to convince someone else you're not sick. We sickened you, and now you won't come in. Don't be stubborn. Come see what a visit could do. We made you, but don't misunderstand. You were you and we try words for you. The making made a sick wreck of you. Me too, me too. Did I sing? Did I wrongly? Yes. Did I wrongly want? I chose that and I chose this. Rented room, I name you solus lapis, Latin for alone, all gone to stone. But if it's my room now and the kingdom's condensed to a fine barb of pain I've pinned into my hair for safekeeping, it's not going to be a bloody kingdom where I brood. I'll make my own room, and it will be small. My room is small, but not too small. My room is green, green succulence and sea. The green of a peony so red it pinkens the comey light string I hang now in my room. Not cavernous and no space to fear. My room, no dank closet where someone may have died or buckled carefully her shoes, then died. I make my bed every morning. I don't know where to start, so I start with the bed. Then I fall to my knees against it. Without knowing what I'm falling to, no mind makes it do it. My body just falls. And I'm going to skip ahead. I'm skipping to Sonnet 31. You think I don't know that when I say Lord, I might be singing into the silo where nothing is stored, where it is written low lights were confused by skyward light and flew its bodies as birds against walls. Well, everyone thrashes against a wall in this life. I don't know what I mean, but I mean it. I don't know what to want, but I want it. And when I say God, it's because no one can know it, not ever, not at all. It's a wall, and it drops to the floor as I fall. And now I'll skip ahead to 34. And this is, I'm not going to read all the way to 39, but I'll read a couple here of about now the home kind of falling. I knew better than to light after light. I knew. I can't recall to see candles out and could put the house down in burning. What if someone asked me then, do you want to receive its ashes? I'd say, yes, that's the right thing. But deep down, I'd say no, no ashes. To imagine the size of the box able to hold my home, then take it into my hands, is something I promised my hands I'd never have them do. They argued their case atrociously well when they gave as evidence, we can't. Yet, lighting candles is how I went on. By candlelight, the house went down. It's no wonder the rats won't come sleep in my newly rented corners. For me, a gathering of low creatures would be a luminous, a concordant, a thing. Be slow to wish extinct the ugly beasts. You can't know when all that's theirs will be more than yours, when a haystack of sleep huddled on your porch, should it come, wouldn't make all that's alive at dawn be the drop of 4 bottles in a handled box that, while they still shake to settle, means someone left a remnant store of himself, a vibration, a glass ghost, a someone, an else, and 4 sweet milks to drink. How deeply I drink up home catalogs day. They shine open my diorama and teach me to lift my tiny arms to hang the dime as a mirrory thing upon my shoebox wall. Here's a sunshine page that reads, a home expands via the wise use of mirrors wherever you wish a window. I've read it all. I've read so much more than I can withstand. A home expands via the you and I. Until then, dearest dime, with my spit shined, I will lift you up. I shall, I do, attend to what you do not have, and thereby, thereby make a home. All right, that's enough sonnets for anybody. And I wanted to close just by reading Psalm 40, just to where we began a bit. And then I'll be signing off with all of you, but I just wanted to say thank you again, Charles, and to the sound techs, and Ryan especially, who's in the background now, doing magical things, and to Philadelphia. Thank you so much for all that really that city brings to the world culturally, musically, in literature and poetry, and also in healthcare, and in saving children at CHOP, Children's Hospital, and Pennsylvania Hospital. The amazing doctors and nurses there saved my daughter's life, born very prematurely, and I just my life then, by extent, was saved by Philadelphia. So, Psalm 40. I am content because before me looms the hope of love. I do not have it. I do not yet have it. It is a bird strong enough to lead me by the rope it bites. Unless I pull, it is strong enough for me. I do worry the end of my days might come and I will not yet have it. But even then, I will be brave upon my deathbed. And why shouldn't I be? I held things here and I felt them. And to all I felt, I will whisper, Hosanna for goodbye. It is sweet to think of myself alone at that very moment, able to say such a thing to all that was my life and to all that was not. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Katie. I'm so glad that you read it, all those together. It was just magnificent. And I would say to anybody, now you've heard it, you have to get this book. I mean, it's really just an amazing, remarkable feat of poetry. And I feel myself lucky, in this position on this program to be able to interview poets like yourself. I mean, I've had a run in, say, the last 7 shows. It's just been astounding how great the poetry is, and to be able to get inside the head of these poets and to discuss where they're coming from, I really think is absolutely wonderful. So I thank you. And of course, I thank Ryan because he makes this all really happen. And as I always do, I like to close the show with, this is just one aspect of Moonstone. Last year, we did close to 130 reading events. We have sponsored 301 poets, gave them a platform to read their poetry. It's astounding. I don't think any place in the country anyone does that. So I just ask you to go to our website, and it's not hard. It's Moonstone Arts, and find a way that you can help to support us to continue to do what we do, because it's really important. We are really at the center of the cultural life of Philadelphia, whether people know it or not. There's, as I said before, there's no organization that does as much as Moonstone. And thank God to Larry and to the other hosts of these shows for all that they do to bring these poets to you. So I thank you, and looking forward to seeing you again next month, and I'm hoping you'll continue to support us.